If you think spending fewer than 183 days in any country makes you automatically tax-free, you're lining yourself up for penalties, audits, and maybe double taxation. The 183-day rule is the most dangerous half-truth in international tax. It isn't a golden ticket, it isn't universal, and in many places it doesn't even decide residency. Today I'll dismantle the 183-day myth, show what actually decides your tax bill, and give you a simple kid-level playbook you can use before you book your next flight, or your next crypto trade, invoice, or salary payment. People love round numbers. 183 sounds official, simple, portable. But there isn't just one 183-day rule. There are several, and they live in different legal universes. Some countries put a day count in their residency test, others don't. Some use 183 as only one ingredient in a much bigger stew. There's also a separate 183 in tax treaties that talks about employment salary, not your overall residency. And some places issue residency certificates if you cross an administrative 183-day threshold, which looks impressive until another country proves you were resident there under its own law, or a treaty tiebreaker points somewhere else. The myth grabs one shiny number and ignores all the labels on the jars. Ready for the first reveal? The things that actually decide your tax bill are residency rules, source rules, treaty tiebreakers, permanent establishment for business, place of effective management for companies, and social security agreements. Remember that info, we're going to need it. Residency and source are the two levers that actually move your tax bill. Residency answers, do you belong here for tax purposes? Which can pull your worldwide income into the calculation. Source answers, where was each stream of income generated, which lets a country tax income linked to its territory even if you're not resident there. Authorities don't just count days. They check whether you have a permanent home available, where your family sleeps, where your bank accounts, driver's license, doctor, and gym are, where you usually spend nights, where your personal and economic ties point, and whether you've actually settled or are only passing through. They look for footprints like registrations, IDs, insurance, leases, and school records. You don't get to cherry pick a single factor and ignore the rest. The full matrix applies, and it's relentless. In the United States, people swear there's a clean 183 rule. Well, not really. The US uses the substantial presence test, which is a weighted formula. You count all your days in the current year, add 1/3 of last year's days, add 1/6 of the year before that. If that total is 183 or more, and you were there at least 31 days this year, you're generally a U.S. tax resident unless you escape through a closer connection exception or a treaty tiebreaker. You can spend 120 days 3 years in a row and still get pulled over the line by the weighted math. Under 183 this year is not a force field. Another problem, U.S. citizens and green card holders are taxed on worldwide income regardless of day counting, so the number never saves them. Non-residents can still face U.S. tax on U.S. source income, even if they fail the weighted test. And the U.S. loves extra clocks. It distinguishes ideas like tax home and abode, which affect exclusions or credits. And it has separate tests for the foreign earned income exclusion that look at bona fide residence or physical presence abroad, completely different day logics from the residency test. No single 183 carries all that water. Cliffhanger. We leave America, but only after agreeing never again to treat one number like a cheat code. Cross the channel and the United Kingdom brings out what feels like a spreadsheet with emotions. The Statutory Residence Test mixes automatic residence, automatic non-residence, and ties like family, a place to live, work patterns, and past presence. You can be UK resident with fewer than 183 days if your ties are strong enough. And you can be non-resident even with big day counts if you meet automatic non-residence rules. It's not a stopwatch, it's a decision tree. And even if you're non-resident, the UK can still tax UK source income, because source has its own drumbeat. The myth rarely mentions source. It should. That's where "but I counted" often goes to die. Ready for the continent where home and habitual abode quietly drive the bus? In Germany and much of the EU, the question, "Do you have a home here you can use anytime?" can beat your day counter. If you maintain a dwelling and actually use it in a pattern that looks like life, not tourism, you can be resident even without reaching 183. The Center of Vital Interests test, where your family, finances, and real activity live, matters deeply under continental laws and in treaty tiebreakers. Digital nomads often trip here. They keep an apartment just in case, leave a partner or kids behind, keep the company and clients in the same country, then wonder why that country still considers them resident. If your life is glued together in one house, you don't become a ghost by sleeping on planes. Portugal and Spain do mention 183 days, but those words sit next to ideas like habitual residence and principal economic interests. Spain can treat you as resident because your spouse or minor children live there, even if your day counting is perfect. Portugal looks at where you normally live, not just the calendar. In both, a permanent home plus where your money life happens can outweigh short absences. If your roots are in Lisbon or Barcelona, you won't uproot residency with a calculator. Inside the OECD model treaty, there's a clause for employment income that uses a 183-day yardstick. It says the host country won't tax your salary if three conditions are all true. You're in the host country no more than 183 days during a set period, your employer isn't resident in that host country, and your pay isn't borne by a permanent establishment your employer has there. Miss anyone, and the host country can tax your salary even if you barely visited. And here's the kicker. This clause is only about employment income. It doesn't decide residency, it doesn't apply to freelancing, business profits, dividends, capital gains, or your crypto flips. People stretch this like chewing gum and try to cover everything. Tax authorities are not amused. Ready for the entrepreneur's plot twist? For business income, days usually aren't the headline. If you freelance or run a company, treaties ask a different question. Did you create a permanent establishment, a PE? That's tax speak for having a real footprint, an office, a workshop, a construction site that runs long enough, or a dependent agent who habitually signs contracts for you. Some treaties add a service PE, where simply doing services in a country long enough can pull you into tax there even without an office. See the pattern? For business income, 183 might be irrelevant. What matters is where you work, how you work, and whether your setup crosses into a local presence. One desk, one signer, one long project. Suddenly, you're on the local tax map. Now you wave a residency certificate like a magic shield. Does it save you? A tax residency certificate is a useful piece of paper that says, a country recognizes you as tax resident there. Many places issue one if you cross their administrative threshold, often 183 days. Great. But if another country also thinks you're resident under its law, you're dual resident, and the treaty tiebreaker decides who wins. That tiebreaker walks down a ladder. First, where's your permanent home? If you have one in both, where's your center of vital interests? If that's cloudy, where's your habitual abode? If still tied, what's your nationality? And if you're still stuck, the two countries negotiate. If your partner and kids, business, and real home are all in country A, a certificate from country B rarely wins. Lesson: facts eat paperwork for breakfast. Domicile. In some systems, like the UK and other common law countries, domicile is your long-term home base, the place you're deeply attached to. It isn't the same as residence. Domicile can affect inheritance tax, whether you can use the remittance basis, or how foreign income is treated. You can stay under 183 and still get caught by rules that hinge on domicile or deemed domicile status. The myth ignores this because it isn't a neat number. Your wallet will feel it anyway. Even if you avoid income tax in a country via treaty or non-residence, you can still owe Social Security contributions under separate agreements. The EU coordinates this among member states. The US has totalization agreements with certain countries. Whether you're employed or self-employed, and where the work is actually done, can assign you to one country's payroll system even if your income tax returns dance elsewhere. In other words, you can win the income tax round and still pay the social tax bill. But of course, digital-nomad visas and territorial systems aren't automatic shields. A digital-nomad visa is a residency permit, not an invisibility cloak. Many require registration, proof of income, and sometimes contributions to local social funds. You still have to check the country's residency test and source rules, especially if your employer or clients are abroad. Territorial systems get misunderstood too. They only tax local income, people say, and then they perform services locally, earn rent, run a business, or manage a company from a beachfront cafe. Surprise, services done there, property there, profits managed there, those are local. And corporate tax can hinge on where the company is actually run, the place of effective management, not just where the paperwork says it was born. Fly your founders into board meetings in the wrong place, and you can shift the company's tax home, create a local PE, or trigger withholding at the worst moment. The 183 chant won't save you. Let's run a few cautionary tales. You move mid-year from country A to country B. A says you're resident because your family and home were there for most of the year. B says you're resident because you met its presence test after arrival. You're dual resident, and the treaty tiebreaker decides. If your center of vital interest stayed in A until December, A usually wins. Or you're a contractor who spends 90 days in country C, but you rent a real office. A local assistant closes deals, and the project stretches over 2 tax years. That can create a service PE or an agent PE, and country C can tax your business profits although you never sniffed 183 days. Or you're a remote employee sitting in country D just for a few months, working for an employer in country E. D can tax your salary because the work is done there. The treaty's 183-day relief might fail if your pay is ultimately borne by a local PE or if your employer is effectively in D for payroll. Meanwhile, E may also tax you as a resident. Yes, foreign tax credits can help, but welcome to Paperwork Mountain. Or take the holiday landlord who claims non-residents but rents out a flat in country F. That rental income is source taxed in F, with or without 183. Residency changes the rate and forms, not the basic right to tax local property. My favorite. The crypto traveler rotating across 3 countries staying under 183 in each. One country treats them as resident because of home availability and habitual abode. The second taxes crypto disposals because the exchange account is tied to a domestic bank and advisor there, and the third taxes staking rewards on receipt while they were physically present. Result, multiple filings and a very creative relationship with coffee. So how do you plan your life without clinging to a magic number? Fix your facts before you fix your flights. List where your homes are, where your family lives, where your job or business is anchored, where your clients are, where boards meet, where banking and licenses sit. The place where those cluster is where a tax authority will say your center of vital interest lives. If you don't like that answer, change the facts, not your Instagram captions. Keep a time map across multiple years. If the US can pull you in, run the weighted math with the 1/3 and the 1/6. If the UK is in play, walk the statutory residence decision tree and count your ties. In EU-style systems, identify your habitual abode and home availability. Don't close your spreadsheet at 182. That's where mistakes start. If 2 countries can both claim you, run the treaty tiebreaker yourself. Permanent home, center of vital interests, habitual abode, nationality, and if still tied, be realistic about how a competent authority negotiation would land. Write a 1-page memo in plain words for future you. It's the best adult homework you'll ever do. Separate your income types. If you're an employee, check whether the treaty's employment income clause really spares you. Under 183 days, employer not resident in the host country, and pay not borne by a local PE. All 3 must be true. If you're self-employed or running a business, analyze PE risk. Do you have a fixed place, a long project, or a dependent agent who closes deals? If you're close to a threshold, redesign the setup. Move contract signing back home. Rotate personnel so no one crosses the time trigger, or avoid renting a dedicated office. Add Social Security every time you plan. Work out which system you contribute to under EU coordination or a US-style totalization agreement, and get a certificate of coverage if you can. Payroll audits move faster than income tax audits and are allergic to excuses. Align corporate substance with personal reality. If you run a company, decide where management and control truly live. Where the board meets, where strategic decisions happen, who signs, and where the directors actually work. If the company lives where you live, either embrace it or redesign governance so your structure is real, not theatrical. Document like an archivist. Keep travel logs, boarding passes, leases, utility bills, school letters, employment contracts, client invoices, and board minutes. For crypto, keep wallet timelines, fair value snapshots, and exchange CSVS. Evidence beats confidence. Plan exits and entries, not just stays. Leaving a high-tax country can trigger exit taxes on unrealized gains for significant shareholders or long-term residents. Entering can trigger split-year rules or immediate worldwide taxation. If you're going to sell stock or unload tokens, time the transactions with the law, not the sunset. Wondering what makes tax officers raise an eyebrow? Saying you're non-resident while your spouse and kids live full-time in the country you left. Keeping a permanent furnished home available and popping back in like it's your favorite cafe. Running staff, servers, a warehouse, or an agent in a country you claim is just a hub. Posting a stable life in one place on social media while your tax return paints you as a tumbleweed. and hopping between tax-free slogans without ever reading a treaty tiebreaker. If your plan is, "I'll tell them I was under 183," your plan needs a plan. So what is 183 actually good for? Treat it like a warning light, not a guarantee. If you cross 183 in a place, odds are high you're resident there under something. But being under 183 doesn't make you safe if you have a real home, family, business, or habitual abode there. And even if you're not resident, source rules, permanent establishment rules, and Social Security can still take a bite. Think of 183 as the beginning of your analysis. The next questions are the real ones. Do you have a permanent home here? Where is your center of vital interest? Did you create a PE? What does the treaty say? Where are you insured? If you can't answer those, you're not planning. You're guessing. Tax systems love guessing games because they always get to make the final guess.